Right, totally.
Yeah, so thanks for jumping on.
Absolutely excited to be here.
Yeah, I was looking at the people that had RSVP'd, and there's actually people from across the country and who are in meetups in Austin and Boston and LA and Portland. So I guess one of the good things about the evolution of these kinds of conversations to being virtual is that you're not just speaking to a local audience, right? There's a little bit more of a purview and an access, which I think is spectacular, because I think it often, even inside of disciplines like design and product in a local community, because we're both in Columbus,
Totally.
it can start to feel a little incestuous and a little sort of closed in, right?
It is a tight-knit community, that's for sure.
Right. So I'm glad that doing this virtually, that people can sort of come together from all across the land to join the conversation. So you have a pretty multi-dimensional background in UX, heavy research, heavy strategy, design, of course, implementation, of course, because if you're going to do the research and the strategy and the design, right, might as well put it into use, right?
Yeah, man, you got to make it work.
So do you look at your background in UX differently than what a typical designer's background might be? Because it seems like you've come at this from a little bit more of a analytical, scientific, and sort of research-centered place than just creating beautiful things.
Yeah, totally. I think that's 100% true. And when I think about UX, I think of the more, really classic definition of UX, where you're really trying to think about all the interactions that a business might have with an end user. And so for me, I think a traditional designer may come at it from more of a, purely UI kind of perspective, and then slowly kind of feel their way into different areas. For me, you put it so nicely that it's a multi-dimensional, but going through my career, it kind of felt like I was just getting to a place where I hit a failure moment and really was just like, okay, so that didn't work. What was I missing? And so whenever I was at OSU working on a health tech startup, the one thing that we failed to do is really get a deep understanding of our users before we sat down to really think about, how to build this thing. And so that led me to a career in user research. In user research, at McGraw Hill, I was, kind of frustrated by, we had all these great insights, but no real way to, take action on those, which led me to, Beam, and then Resource Ammirati, which is now IBM iX, to really put those research insights into solid action. And then now at Beam, I do a lot more like just enablement, like pure enablement, because we're a small, super fast moving fintech company. And so a lot of it is just kind of feeling your way through it. But yeah, I appreciate you assembling that into a very eloquent multidisciplinary package. That's a great way to think about it. It didn't feel that way going through it.
It almost never does, right?
Right.
And you sort of come out the other side of it, and if you're going to take the sort of good aspects out of it, it seems more valuable than when you were going through it, and it seems sort of unfocused and disjointed, and you're just sort of trying to go from this thing to gig to gig to sort of figure out, all right, is this it? Have I landed where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Totally.
Right. And I think for a lot of creative people in particular, right, that's a challenge, right, along the way, right? Because it's not just about applying the craft. It's about, are you applying the craft to a problem that you're interested in? Are you applying the craft in an environment that you're interested in, with other teammates that you find interesting, right? And that sort of embolden you, right? So it can feel, I think, kind of disjointed, but in the end, it's almost like a compass that's directing you, right? And you're sort of picking a new direction, as part of each of those gigs.
Yeah, I think a compass is like a really good analogy, right? Like, I was such a classic millennial, like on my career for a meaning quest. And I always just, had this fascination from a really young age, how can I have the biggest possible impact on the world? And I think like each kind of path just led me to, I wouldn't say a dead end, but just a point where, I couldn't really push the boundaries anymore. And so I had to really just take that logical next step to have that bigger impact. So whether it was, getting a deeper understanding of how to do really meaningful user research, or figuring out how to take that into the right strategy, or actually figuring out how to execute on the right strategy, and then put all that back into, a more consistent feedback loop.
What did your background about UX, and now that you have a more holistic sort of responsibility around product, right? What did UX sort of teach you about the way that users think and what they value versus the way that most product managers and product owners do?
No, that's an awesome question. I think about this a lot. Two really big things I think that I pull from sort of my UX days into my product days now. One, I think is, like I was saying, like value that you're creating as a company comes from every single interaction that you have with a customer. It's not just a specific product line. It's not just the mobile app. It's not just the website. It's really the totality of all those steps in the journey, and how can you make those really work together to deliver an entire value proposition to someone. So it's not just enough to have, a really compelling UI in your mobile app if you don't have, really great customer support. So you gotta have to really think about how you work all those together. The other thing I think you and I were kind of half joking about before everyone got on here, but the world doesn't see everything like we do. Everyone sees everything the way they are, right? And so really getting a deep understanding of who your customers are, what their perspective is, what their struggle points are, what are their hopes and desires, and then really figuring out how to deliver a lot of value to them are two really big things that I think I, draw upon in my product days now that I think, normal product designer or manager might not have, right? Like traditionally the role comes from, CPG world where maybe you're, building, canned soup or microwave dinners, right? And so that's like it, right? Like you see the object in the store, you buy it, and that's kind of the end of the journey. But now that we have technology that basically is omnipresent and completely surrounds us, it's very present in your everyday life, and you've really got to think about that as a digital product manager.
How do you sort of now think about UX research as a discipline beyond typical UX validation and feedback that most designers and product teams are after, right? Most of us that are into building products, we do some upfront work, right, with users and customers around what they want or what they value and why they value it and how it's going to impact them, and then we go create something and we take it back to them and we say, how close are we, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Or, we're, completely off base and, it's like we didn't listen at all. Versus sort of UX research, which I think, in very layman's terms, sort of doesn't think about the end product as much as really peeling back the layers around the problem and where customers are, right? And what they value. And so how much value is there in that, in UX research being disconnected from a product to really be super valuable to a product?
Yeah, no, totally. I think you really hit the nail on the head there. It is less about, what do you think of my product? What are your likes or dislikes of it? How could we improve it? And it's more just really a deep understanding of who this person is as a human being, or who this market segment is based on, a set of traits. It's really easy in the traditional UX sense to get kind of caught up in the user interface and think about the fact that, hey, the only thing that matters in this person's life is like what's on this screen. But in reality, there's a human on the other end of that screen. And that human has a whole past that is shaping their reality. They have a whole set of constraints and cultural implications that are put on them. Right. And so user experience research, in my mind, is really about diving deep into that and really uncovering who these people are, what kind of a world they live in, and where can you best add value to their life.
Is that, a jobs to be done, sort of methodology in your mind? Is that too boxed in? Is that too sort of regimented? Because it seems like, and it feels like, we still don't, by and large, understand our users and our customers as well as we could. Part of that is because we get impatient and we just want to start building things, because building things feels like progress, right? And so for you, what is good user sort of research and sort of discovery? What does that feel like? And is there a wrapper or a methodology that you like as part of that?
Yeah, for sure. No, great question. I think jobs to done, at a high level is something that really distills it down into like its really core essence. And it's a great way to kind of like communicate it to an audience that maybe isn't as steeped in kind of user research. But to me, it's more rooted in both qualitative and quantitative, but mostly in the social sciences. So a lot of it pulls from psychology, anthropology, sociology, and really trying to, get at what is that like core need or motivation that is really driving this person to do this, right? What is going to motivate them to go through, all your sign up screens, read everything that they need to about your company to figure out how to use this. A lot of products require you to change some kind of behavior that you're doing today, which as humans, we love to just automate and habituate, like our days away, right? So our brains can focus on other things. And so it's a lot of effort to adopt a new product or service. And so, you've really got to get down to the sort of, below sub levels, right? Like, is this person really motivated to create a legacy for their family? Or what are they really after whenever they're trying to use your product? And so I think the jobs to done framework is like a really great kind of surface level, high level way to communicate it. A lot of executives or senior leadership seem to gravitate towards that sort of framework. But the actual user research science, in my mind, is a couple steps below, where you really want to understand those deep needs, motivations. Whenever I was at McGraw Hill as a user research, we used to just go sit in classrooms for hours on end and never once ask them about any of the products that were McGraw Hill that they were using. We were purely there to just understand, what it was like to be in a teacher's shoes. Day in and day out today. I'm a little bit removed at this point from being in K through 12, quite different now. They're all on Chromebooks. They're all using, Google Documents. There's a whole new world of kind of being teased. I was there when one student went into, Google Drive and deleted a kid's entire report because you could collaborate in there. And so, just observing those kinds of insights are so priceless when you actually get down to starting to think about, what is this product? How's it going to fit into this person's life? And how is this really going to drive value?
Jonathan, ain't nobody got time for all that. In libraries. We got stuff to build.
We just got to ship, right? What?
Right.
Come on.
Haven't you followed the Silicon Valley mantra of fail fast and break things, and
right, exactly. Yeah, it worked for Zuck. Why, look where that turned out, right?
Right, exactly. Great. It's meta at this point, literally. It is one of the reasons that we still have so much sort of product and user friction, is because of a lack of really good in-depth user sort of research and analysis. Because it still feels like, even though everybody knows we should build alongside users, we should iterate alongside users, we should validate with them, we should incorporate their feedback right into our roadmaps and all of this, it still feels like lots of products get built with lots of friction points, some major, some minor, but still lots of friction points. And does that really go back to the fact that we don't really know how to do very good user UX research, and we sort of still build a little too much in a vacuum?
Yeah, I think it does. I think one thing that I've found though is I've moved, into head of product and in a startup that very much embraces the move fast and break things mentality for a number of reasons. But it's really hard to kind of balance everything whenever you're in that situation, right? Like you've got really three competing demands whenever you're creating a new product or service. You've really got to think about desirability, right? Being the most important thing. Like, what does the end consumer of this really want? But then you've also got kind of like feasibility from a technology perspective, and what can we actually do with the resources we have? And then at the end of the day, unless you're doing a nonprofit or some kind of a governmental agency, you're running a business too. And so at Rhove, I spend a lot of time trying to balance that sort of trifecta. And there's just this like insanely tension, but I think it's a really good tension where you sort of have to push pull on things. And sometimes, technology wins out because whatever tech stack you chose to use really, is not going to be able to enable that super clean and frictionless experience that we want. Or the business just has some objective that we're really trying to hit that maybe isn't always in the best use of the user, right? And so it's really a balance, I think. But yeah, user research is always something that I think people take for granted or will immediately kind of skip over or not really see the insane value of actually getting some of those insights.
So you mentioned Rhove. So you're a co-founder, you're in charge of product there. Give everybody a little bit of a background on Rhove, right? What problem you guys solve and sort of who you're solving it for.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rhove is kind of like the Robinhood for real estate, except for I like to say we're going to give you better returns. And so in similar fashion, how Robinhood kind of democratized stock trading, we're going to do that for real estate. And so it's pretty easy to look in the news today and see how out of reach, home ownership is getting, or just how insane the real estate market is for today. Now at 35 to 40, millennials are finally starting to own some properties, but only about 2 years ago, your average millennial had zero net real estate wealth, which is a huge problem because real estate historically has been where a lot of people have made a significant amount of wealth. And so we're really trying to fix that for millennials and Gen Z as well. It's a whole new way to invest where you can actually download the app, invest in an individual commercial real estate building, all for just $1 in about a minute, which is insane. Thinking about the traditional home ownership path today, you're looking at 60 to 90 days if you can actually find a house that you can afford to, put a down payment in. And so now you can get exposure to, real estate right in your own communities right now. And so we're on a really ambitious mission to create $1 trillion worth of real estate wealth for 1 billion people globally. And so that's what we're up to. We're super excited. We've been at it since about 2019. I've had an amazing couple co-founders, Calvin Cooper, who I know you know, and then Jonathan Slemp, who was at Nationwide Children's and a couple other agencies here before that. So really fortunate to get to work with so many amazing people there.
How's it been for you? One, being a co-founder, two, also being in charge of product holistically versus more sort of focused UX, right, roles. What's that evolution been for you personally?
Yeah, it's been really challenging. I mean, I think the role itself, as a startup is just a lot of trade-offs and a lot of really hard decisions. Like I said, we're always trying to manage that kind of healthy tension between desirability, feasibility, and viability. And so, we're always trying to think about what is the right thing for the end user. But at the end of the day, we're a small, lean startup with limited resources. We can only do so much. But we all have huge grand visions. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, if we've got this, grand vision at the end of the day, what do we do today to really make this meaningful? And so, just to give you an example, when we first launched, there's an insane amount of work that goes into building, a financial product and financial systems from scratch. And so the very first thing we did was like, okay, the simplest thing that we have to do is get a savings account, right? And so everyone's going to need some way to transfer money in and out of Rhove. And so that was a meaningful product that we had. The next evolution was, okay, what if you could invest in the apartment that you live in, right? And so we actually did an NFT blockchain-based solution where you could invest in the apartment that you lived in. And you were the actual owner of a piece of that, which was super meaningful to people who, in their lifetime had never had this opportunity to be an owner. And now that we've broadened that up, right, what we found in that sort of last iteration was it's not just enough to have only the people living in that building invest. You also want the people, across the street to be able to take advantage of that. Community is so much more than just the residents of that building. Take Gravity, for example, which is one of our properties. There's a really robust community there of residents, but there's also people, like Kenny that run the Roosevelt. Pelotonia is there, BarkBox is there. And so why can't we let them invest and own in the places that they love and work too? And so it's just been a real challenging experience. I've had to really call into question a lot of my own values and beliefs and get comfortable with, some humble pie here and there. I think in my UX strategy days, it was like, if we could just have that perfect vision, or if we could just do that, perfect research. But at the end of the day, it's so hard to take that perfect research and perfect vision and turn it into a reality.
Do you think that it's easier to take that sort of ideal vision and sort of ideal end state and capture it in a larger enterprise than a startup? Or do you think that there are challenges irrespective of the size of organization and sort of size of and state of the product?
No, for sure. I do think, when you're a larger organization, you definitely have more resources to put towards things. But something at Rhove that we've really felt has been a huge unlock for us is just putting constraints on the project. Right. So, there's kind of this Zen-like state that you have to reach where if you give yourself too much time, you're going to take it, or too much resources, you're ultimately going to fill that in. But if you give yourself too little, then you really start to get into a place of you're cutting too many corners and it's not meaningful. And so I think this is going to, we'll see, but we're hoping to really scale that up. When I think back to when we used to consult to major Fortune 500 companies at IBM iX, working with various different clients that had, multi-million-dollar budgets and would take years to get a product to market. Some of that seems a little too much to, in hindsight now. It's like, if you give yourself 3 years and $10 million, it's going to take 3 years and $10 million. Versus at Rhove, we've come up with these sort of 30-day to 1 week roadmaps where we want to make meaningful change in our business in 30-day to 1 week. So we're actually, just moving so fast right now in terms of things, but we're figuring out right now how we can actually buy and sell crypto in less than a week. And so something that, took Coinbase years, we're going to try and figure out how to do in a week.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where have you been the most challenged through this, coming from a mostly UX centric, background and professional experience into now a more holistic product role and perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest one for me is really, working on that sort of feasibility section of that trifecta, right? I think, coming at it from UX and user research, you really get that deep desirability of what users want. And, that doesn't always work for a business, right? Like at the end of the day, you've got to, charge money in some way. And if you're not charging money, then you're basically turning the user into the product, which no one wants, right? And you basically have what Facebook is today. And so that's been a good stretch for me to really, think about what it means to actually create business viability and how to really balance those things. And I think more than that, I've really just had to kind of check my own ego at the door and know that, some of the things that I held as really sincerely held beliefs as a UX or a consultant. When you're out in the arena, it gives you a really different perspective on what it means to, actually get this stuff built.
Yeah, was this a calculated strategic next step for you to become the co-founder of a company and to be in charge of product, or was this an opportunistic thing where the Rhove, you had the opportunity to join Rhove and then you were like, okay, well, let's do it?
Yeah, no, great question. I would love to tell you that I had some, 5-year vision written down somewhere, or like the Jim Carrey story where he, wrote himself a $2 million check and cashed it on the day or whatever, but that is like totally not the case. Quite the opposite, actually. I think, I was pretty heavily involved in the startup space, working at Beam and just being involved in a number of organizations here around Columbus. And I kind of decided I wasn't going to do that ever again. It was pretty much at that moment that the Rhove opportunity came up. And so, I always said that if I was going to,
you reverse manifested it. You said, I'm never going to do this again. And of course, immediately then the Rhove opportunity was there.
Totally. That is a bit of a theme in my life, unfortunately. So I feel like I've got to reverse psychology, my manifestations here. But yeah, I always said if I was going to do it, it would be co-founder. And so, I had the opportunity to sort of support, become co-founder. And then once we got the funding, it was just, it was too good of an opportunity to not take this. But honestly, subconsciously, I think I was growing somewhat frustrated. I think just by my role as sort of purely UX strategy, just really chomping at the bit, I think, to get in that more decision maker role, and that seat that can have kind of a larger impact on the product, because you end up being really the CEO of kind of the experience that you're delivering. And so while, I'm always one to really push the boundaries in whatever role I'm in, I'm never one to believe that your title has to define you. At the end of the day, there is only so much you can do when you're not kind of in that decision-making seat. And so being in that role has been something that I definitely wanted to take on. And it's been a really fun and exciting time since then.
What have you leveraged from your UX background the most? And do you think a UX background is a good sort of training ground to then be in a product role? Do you think there are better training grounds? And if so, what are those, right? How do you now sort of look at your experience in UX and how it translated to now being in charge of product?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't think of a better path to product management, especially in the digital space. I'm obviously biased, and this is my world that I live in, and so I'm going to say that it's the best. There could be better paths, but just some of the skills that I feel like you pick up in UX, like understanding the customer and getting that deep empathy and really knowing how important that is and how to advocate on behalf of that user. Really thinking about it from more of a total system perspective, and really leveraging system thinking. In the early days of Rhove, we got real caught up and kind of doing all these sort of unique one-offs for different customers, because we were trying to make a sale, right? And that was really important for us to move forward. But I think taking a step back now, everything we do is really more from a system approach. And so how do we build that system, and then have different customers fit into that system? And then the third thing that I think is really, really important is just prototyping. And so how do you prototype and get something to market so that people can get a read on it? And so after you've developed that really deep, empathy, created that system, what is the lightest weight piece of something that we can get out there? And so, with those constraints, right? Like whenever you do something in a week or 30 days, it's basically a prototype at best, right? The front end may look like that experience, but the back of that maybe isn't connected to a really robust, database that accounts for all the sort of off happy path situations. It's like basically a spreadsheet, or there's someone there every night that's like making that thing work. And so I think, thinking at it from sort of a prototype perspective has been really, really helpful in what I'm doing now, as well as that sort of system thinking and developing that deep empathy.
Often different craftspeople can, even though every role inside of creating a product is really a relationship role, right? But if you're a craftsperson around UX or UI, or you're an engineer or you're a DevOps person, right? Whatever your sort of contribution or your craft is inside of a product, you can get a little sort of siloed, right, in just your craft, right?
Totally.
Where if you're in charge of the whole product, you can't be sort of too craft narrow, for lack of a better term, right? Have you had to deal with that a little bit, coming from a UX sort of background and being really sort of heavily involved in one craft aspect of the product and getting more and figuring out, okay, how do I be a more holistic thinker, and how do I sort of think about how this impacts engineering more than I used to, right? Or how this affects DevOps more than I used to. Can you talk about that, of how, you have to sort of almost evolve out beyond that initial craft to being even more empathetic for the other crafts that have to make a product work?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so I think I was fortunate, at Beam and in other roles where I did get to work really part and parcel with the engineers that were building the product, and it was really, humbling, I'm going to say, to see, all the things that, you may propose in this grandiose vision of this, amazing experience. But when you actually think about, okay, cool, now how do I actually code that or build that? It just gives you an entirely new perspective. Likewise, working with sales teams or business development folks, they're thinking about, okay, well, how do I, sell this, or how do I make this more meaningful? And, I think when I was at McGraw Hill and we worked with sales folks a lot of time, I didn't really, I kind of didn't take their perspective maybe as serious as I kind of should have or could have. But now that I'm, heading up this organization and, ultimately, the buck stops at me and two other people on whether we're successful or not, you've really got to lean in there, develop, take those empathy skills and direct them internally to your team. Because sure, we could, figure out how to get this done and enable this experience, but maybe that means that, your team of engineers doesn't sleep for 2 weeks, right? And what does that mean for them? Does that really put them in the best mindset to be creating these really meaningful products?
How do you think about outcomes now differently, right? Because as a UX person, the outcomes are maybe different than thinking about outcomes as an owner of a product. Have you sort of shifted your thinking around what success means and what outcomes you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think at Resource, we were already pretty focused on okay, what's the actual business objective we're trying to drive here? And we're really, good about trying to set that up. We did a project at the Wexner Medical Center where we were working on their patient experience for all of their hospitals. And, one of the things that they really cared a lot about was this sort of customer satisfaction score. And, there are very intricate parts of what that satisfaction score meant. And so, looking into those 5 or 6 things that we just really had to nail and figure out how we could drive behavior there really helped shape the whole project and making more meaningful. And so, I take all of that into Rhove. We're a huge sort of OKR EOS company where we've always, every week take a look at our OKRs and, are very performance management based, trying to think about, okay, this OKR metric is really moving forward well. How do we double down on this other one that's not? Or maybe we need to lean more into this specific OKR. And so I think, a lot of that really does shape how you think about it. So, some of the things that, would be really nice to have or would be really great product experiences that could, deliver a lot of value ultimately don't have a direct correlation to whatever outcome you're trying to achieve at this day. And so, limited time, limited resources, you've got to like make those tough decisions and really stay focused there.
Yeah. So if a practitioner from a UX perspective, UI perspective, even maybe as a project manager now or some other, role and discipline, is either thinking about or just finds themselves right with the opportunity to now be in product more holistically than their individual contributor role. What advice would you give them now as part of that transition, since you've experienced it and gone through it?
Yeah, I would say be gentle with yourself. Give yourself some self-compassion. You're in a new role. You're not going to know everything. I always took kind of a do, fail, learn approach when I was thinking about it. It's kind of like when you first pick up an iPhone, if anyone can actually remember that and point in their life now. You didn't read an instruction manual on how to use an iPhone or really think about, what was the right approach to using an iPhone, right? You just kind of started doing it. And ultimately you hit a fail point where you couldn't figure out how to do something. And at that moment you then learned. And so I really take that approach to my career, honestly, where I kind of hit a fail point and then, learn from it. I would read a lot too. There's just so much out there in the internet today, just so much great content. Depending on whether you're at a large organization or a startup, I would point you to maybe different people. Marty Kagan is like one of the all-time greatest, like kind of product managements. He's the founder and partner at Silicon Valley Product Group. He's wrote 2 really great books, Inspired and Empowered. His audience is really for, you're running or part of, a 70 to 80 person sort of product team in a large organization. But there's just some insanely good insights there that we even take some of that, just sort of their empowered teams mindset into the startup and how we think about things. So I would definitely read a lot, talk to people too. I mean, there's so many people that are out there doing this today, have been doing this. And, I think we all kind of get like, we all get that kind of Midwest humble. Well, I guess we've got people from all over the world here, but, normally people are really open to talking about their experiences or their career and are honestly normally flattered that you would ask them for their opinions on stuff. And so just getting coffee with people whenever you can, or lunch, or going to events like this, I think is another really, really great way where you can just hear people's perspectives. It's not like you can go to school to become a product manager, right? There's no product manager institute out there that has like a body of knowledge for you. And so getting out there and talking to practitioners, I think, is another great way. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think you've just got to like roll up your sleeves and try it out. So if you're in a product role, you're already in the driver's seat, able to take that on. If you're not, figure out ways that within your current job, you can kind of take on some of those product like responsibilities. Whenever we were at IBM iX, we were constantly, pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be UX and UX strategy, and moving that further and further into, what I consider to be more of, product manager today.
Is there, now that you've been in the product role a little bit for, at Rhove, is there anything that you now see that you could have been more prepared, or is that just sort of Monday morning quarterbacking and you would have had no way to realistically know that you could have been more prepared and done anything about it?
Yeah. I don't know. I had the benefit of being at an early stage startup with Beam for a while. So I kind of got a little bit of a taste of it there. And even before I joined Beam, I was very heavily involved in like your startup weekends here in town, or other kind of hackathons like that start to give you a taste of what it's like. But when you're a co-founder and kind of heading it up, it's a whole different roller coaster that you're riding. And so I've, just tried to, I actually got some really sage advice on my way out from my old manager, who she had actually started her own consultancy and ran it for a number of years. but she was like, you're going to have extreme highs and extreme lows as you're going through this. It's best if you don't get like too excited about the highs or too down about the lows. Just try and stay as even keeled about things as possible. And that has been some of just the best advice. So many times in life, just having the right mindset can completely change whatever you're up to. And so from, a skills perspective, sure, I probably could have read more, or, maybe gotten an MBA to like know more about the business side of things. But ultimately, I think just having the right mindset is really the best thing that you can take into any kind of a new experience like this.
Yep, makes sense. If anybody's got a question for Jonathan, we'll take a couple. Just ask to be unmuted, and then we'll get you unmuted, and then you can ask Jonathan your question. Or you can throw it in the chat if you're shy. Or if nobody has any questions, then we will wrap up.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah, hey.
Hey, Ryan. What's up, man? How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, man.
So
Your hair's looking nice today.
We both worked at, oh, yours as well. We used to work at IBMIX together years ago.
Yeah.
I was just going to throw out a question.
Why does Ryan look so much younger than you if you guys work together?
I know.
Oh, come on.
I know. Ryan was my my boss there for a little bit.
Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
This pop up a few weeks. I'm like, man, I gotta see what Jonathan's up to. So I was just going to ask, just curious. Back to the user research. I love that aspect. Does user research or research like that ever stop?
I don't think it does. I think, you can only learn so much when you're out there. And I think, there's nothing to replace a solid foundation of research. But, humans are dynamic, culture is dynamic. Different things are going to happen that may, impact that. And so I think really getting back out as much as you can outside of the building to reobserve and kind of check in on cultural trends is really, really important. And then obviously once you have a product in market, just developing that constant feedback loop from end users, I think is also really, really important. It's so easy to, have assumptions internally. And I think that is like one of the big killers of products, right? Is just assuming that, someone's going to love this or someone's going to hate this or this experience is meeting them exactly right. And, we rely a lot on data in a startup because that can give you kind of immediate feedback on actual behavior. But at the end of the day, data only gives you so much. It's really nothing without that really deep kind of qualitative to wrap context around what's going on there. So yeah, great question. I don't think
awesome, man. I was just really curious to hear it from you in that more product ownership standpoint and staying with the product over time. Just kind of curious how that works from that standpoint. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, man. Good to see you.
Hey, Jonathan, especially as part of product-led growth now, which is almost seemingly all sort of quantitative, right, and data-driven. Like how are users using the product? Where are they getting hung up, right? Where are they falling out? Where are they abandoning, et cetera? It feels like the scales have tipped way toward the quantitative now and sort of the analytics data side, and we're losing a lot of the qualitative, where you just rarely hear about product teams getting out into the field and actually observing the situations, the environments that their products are used in, even if they're digital products, right? It still matters when and where someone's using it, right? And the environment in which they're using it in, right? And whether there's distractions they have, right? Is there a way, do you think that the pendulum has swung too far to the quantitative side? And if so, how do we sort of get it and nudge it back to an equal balance with qualitative, or maybe not even equal, but at least a little bit more balance?
Yeah, absolutely. People really like numbers, right? They feel very tangible and solid. And we've kind of grown up with them our entire lives. And, important influential people will throw out numbers all the time. But it almost feels like this kind of false security blanket sometimes, that, 90% of, our downloads are creating accounts or whatever. So we must be killing it. It's got to be great, right? But personally, I feel like the data can only tell you so much. And I think the data can also, really be a crutch sometimes. And it should never fully replace, actually getting out and getting that deeper context. To your point, people have whole lives that happen outside of your, product or service, right? That the data is never going to touch, no matter how much Facebook or Instagram tracks you around the internet, right? You're never going to get that total 360 picture of that person without talking to them. It's also really easy to make, the wrong assumption from the data too. And so, if you just look at a single data point, not in context from a trend line, or you're not looking at the more important data point, it's really, really easy to miss that. So how do we get that back? Some of the stuff that we've tried at Rhove is just keeping it more lean and using other more scalable channels. And so there's a lot of community building platforms like Discord that we take advantage of now, where we can pretty easily, put a question out to folks and get feedback really quick. And so that's not going to take the place of, doing a really nice ethnograph. And we still try and do those on a somewhat frequent basis. But it's easy to do those kind of weekly check-ins with groups just to see where they're at on things. Also just sending them quick little 2-question surveys, after they complete a really meaningful task, to make sure you're wrapping that kind of qualitative to that. And so that's how we've been sort of approaching it. Obviously I love to do the large, meaty, deep sort of ethnographies, but just having those sort of micro feedback moments throughout your product is another great way to really get that qual in there and have it happen on a more frequent and more immediate basis, which I think, everyone likes, right? They want it now, right? They don't want to spend the 3 or 4 weeks it takes to do a really good piece of research.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've swung so far to the quantitative side is, speed's important, right? But if you don't have the context that you need or that you should have, you could be speeding in the wrong direction, right? Which is I think often what we see now, right? Is teams are building with great pace, but they're building in the wrong direction, and then they get to a point of saying, oh, well, we validated this and users said, and this is what they said they wanted. And it's yeah, but you only went 2 layers deep, right? With that validation, instead of going 5 or 6 or 10, whatever, how many layers it was sort of warranted, right? Around that particular problem and aspect of the product and of your user's existence. And so I think the qualitative piece is, my hope is that people begin to value it and get back to it, because I think a lot of product friction right now is because we're surface level, right? I'm around the problem and a user's view of it. And then when we build a surface solution to it, then we're surprised that it doesn't have that much value for them, and they're not engaging in the way that we expected them to.
No, I 100% agree with you. It's so easy to, put confirmation bias on data, right? It's way harder to put confirmation bias when you're actually sitting in front of a person and they're telling you one thing.
Right. When they turn to you and they say, I hate this. I mean, that's pretty definitive.
Right. Yep. One of our previous prototypes we thought was doing really, really well, by the metrics. And that people were loving it because we just couldn't believe that people were putting, X amount of dollars in or signing in X amount of times. But when we got out to talk to them, they were not that excited about it, to be totally honest. Right. And so the data all looked good, but when we talked to them and, they knew we were part of the company, and it felt like they were sugarcoating it a little bit too. Right. And so after we talked to even just 10 customers, it was clear that there was not enough value here yet for this to be really meaningful, despite what the data was. We were kind of fooling ourselves into thinking that it was.
Yeah, we can get a lot of false positives, right? That we think we're on the right track when we might be mostly on the right track, but it's still not a right enough track, right, to actually get the outcomes that we want out of it for users or for ourselves.
Totally, especially early stage and a product life cycle. When you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of users, and they're maybe not in there quite every single day. That data could be wildly wrong when you extrapolate that across a larger population, right?
Root's a good story. And for those that aren't from Columbus, you might not be familiar with an auto insurance company called Root that is now not really a startup anymore. They went public and, pretty successful from, virtually every measure. But I've known the team at Root for a while, even pre-Root. And one of the things that they ran into really early with the product was they were getting a lot of downloads and they were getting a lot of people to get a rate through the app. And then people weren't actually converting into having a policy through them, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And the hiccup was that customers didn't want to have to deal with the hassle of canceling their current car insurance.
Yep.
And so they finally, through talking to users about why they weren't converting, they figured it out. And so then they added essentially a power of attorney button that gave them the authority to cancel a customer's car insurance, right? But that tells you how sort of fragile some of these things can be. Somebody might be saving a couple $100, right, on car insurance, yet they weren't going to make the 5-minute phone call to their existing agent or insurance company to cancel their insurance, right? So these things can be very nuanced and very fragile that have massive consequences, because once they figured that out, their policy conversions went up 73% or some crazy number.
That's crazy.
So super delicate and fragile if you're not getting, the right sort of inputs and sort of assessments, right?
Oh, totally. And I mean, we had that same problem too. Whenever we were starting a new product, we would have people create an account and basically get to the dashboard and then kind of drop. And we were like, oh, there just must not be enough value there yet, right? Like, so we kept trying to build more new features on top of that. It wasn't until we actually got out and talked to them that we found out that it was they just didn't know what to do next. They didn't know what that next step actually was. And so in less than a sprint, we were able to get just a little progress bar that kind of just mapped out the next 3 steps for them, changed our conversions by 70%. And so just something as small as a little status bar completely changed all of our metrics. But we wouldn't have known that without talking to them, right? You can't, once you just see that there's a dropout point in the data, you can't actually figure out why that is, right?
Right, absolutely. My man, good chatting with you. Any final thoughts for the crew and to put into the archives as part of this recording when people, 20 or 30 years from now are watching this on YouTube?
No, just thanks so much for everyone's time and thoughts. And yeah, I'm always open. If anyone has any, additional questions, I can be reached at jnutt4 on Twitter or jnutt@rhove.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always down to talk to people. Whenever I was first working in the UX and product space, talking with pros, and not to think that I'm a pro, but just talking with someone with experience in the space was some of the most meaningful moments in my career development. And so I'm happy to give that back to everyone.
Well, you're humble because you are a pro at this point.
It's crazy to think.
Yeah. Thanks for grabbing the mic and jumping on. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
Yep. Thanks everybody. See you. Have a good day.